Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Big Ideas Lesson 6.5, page 242 and 243. And you know, I hope you have already read those pages so that you have a great idea of what we're going to be discussing tonight. A little hint, you may want to, as we go through a few things in here, especially the examples, you might want to listen and watch. Watch and listen first, then pause the video and write the stuff down so that you're repeating it again in your head as you're looking and copying down the notes. It might help you understand and retain this information a lot better. Up to you. Yes, it will take a few more minutes to do your notes. However, it will, in the end, provide more understanding. Today, we're going to use percent of change formula to solve percent problems. Our essential question: what is a percent of increase or a percent of decrease? How is it found and how is it interpreted? So we'll discuss that essential question in class. Ladies and gentlemen, you had to take notes on percent of change. From the key idea at the page 242. Now I'm hoping that you wrote down percent of change. I'm going to abbreviate percent of change and call that POC. So you would have written down that the POC is equal to the amount of change, divided by the original amount. And how you found that was that you would take a look, or you would figure it out from a story problem. What was my original amount? Well, in this particular case, I've got 5, and my new amount is 12. So to go from 5 to my new amount 12, that's obviously an increase. And then you would have used the POC, the percent of change formula, and you would have 12 minus 5, and you divide it by 5, because that's the original amount. Over here on the second one, original 29, new 17, you can see that going from 29 to 17, well, that is a decrease. And then you would have found the amount of change by taking 29 and subtracting 17 and dividing that by 17. Now, that requires that to be able to label it an increase or a decrease, that you take a look at what's going on, and then taking the high number and subtracting the low number to get your amount of change. But you would have to recognize, is it increasing or is it decreasing? I'm going to show you Mr. Ross's formula. This is how Mr. Ross chooses to do it, because I don't want to have to worry about certain types of things that you'll understand as I go this. I say that this is Mr. Ross, by the way, percent of change is equal to, I say, the new amount minus the original amount, all divided by the original amount. And then, if my answer is positive, then it's an increase. If my answer is negative, it's a decrease. I'll do some examples both ways during the course of this to help you out. But that's the way it is. Here we go. Let's do some examples. Finding a percent of increase. So all the examples that we're going to do now, they are definitely increase. Okay? So it says here, a science club had 25 members. Now it has 30 members. Find the percent of change, round to the nearest tenth if necessary. All right. So we know that our original is 25. Our new is 30. I can see 25 to 30 is an increase. And I could take 30 minus 25, divide by 25. That's what the book showed you. Mr. Ross's way would say new minus original, which would also be 30, minus 25. That's my new minus original, all divided by my original, which again is 25. So you're going to get the same thing. You're going to get a positive answer. Why? Well, you're going to get a positive answer because it's an increase. So when I do this math, I know that this would be, either way, it gives me 5 divided by 25, and then when I do that math using a calculator, I get 0.2. Well, 0.2, that's a decimal. It's asking for percent. So I would change that decimal into percent, and I would call this a 20% increase. Perfect. 20% increase. Our next example. Finding the percent of change and rounding to the nearest tenth if necessary. Original is 20, new is 23. So I'm going to do this Mr. Ross's way. I'm not going to do it both ways every single time. I'm going to do this with Mr. Ross's way, where I take my new, subtract my original, divide it by original. my percent of change is equal to that. My new is 23, my original is 20, dividing by my original 20. That gives me 3 divided by 20, and 3 divided by 20 would actually give me 0.15. And of course, as a percent, that would be a 15%. And obviously, our original to our new was an increase, so this would be an increase because our new is greater than our original. All right? 75% on the first test to 88% on the second test. Again, it doesn't matter which way you choose to do it. Anytime it's positive, it makes sense. But I'm going to do mine. New minus original over original, which the new is 88%. My original test score was 75%, dividing by 75%. Now you can change them to decimals if you want because they're percents, or you can just leave them in whole numbers. They will give you the same answer. So I'm going to use the whole numbers, 88 minus 75 over 75. All right? That would give me 13 over 75. And when I use my calculator, I get 0.173, and that 3 does repeat. It goes on and on and on. So now, rounding to the nearest tenth, that would be a 17.3 repeating percent, and obviously we're doing all increase. Our number went from 75 to 88. 88 is greater, so this is an increase. 17.3 repeating percent increase. Ladies and gentlemen, let's find the new amount. So this is a little bit different than what we've been doing. However, we could use the percent of change if we wanted, and I'll show you that way, and then I'm going to erase it and show you a different way that's not quite as complicated. So this says, find the new amount. 15 inches is increased by 20%. Well, you know, percent of change, according to Mr. Ross, is new minus original over original. That's my formula. If you like the amount of change, if you just want to take a look at it and say it's an increase because the new number is greater, or it's a decrease because the new number is smaller, and then subtract the smaller from the bigger, and then divide by the original, well, you can do all that. I like this one. I can remember this one flat out, hands down. All right, so knowing that, well, what would be my percent increase? My percent increase is 20%. To do that, I would do it 0.2. Or I could put 0.20 is equal to my new amount. Well, I don't know my new amount. That's what I'm trying to find, my new amount. Minus my original amount, which was 15. All divided by the original amount, 15. Following our order of operations, we would multiply both sides by 15 first. And you would get 3 is equal to your new amount minus 15. So then you would add 15 to both sides. And you would say that 18 is equal to n, so my new amount is 18. Now, this works. It works every single time. I'm just saying this looks complicated to me. It does. So I'm going to show you 2 other ways that I don't think are quite as complicated. So pay attention. You could have written that down if you wanted to. Hopefully you watched and listened to me first before you decided to write down. When you're done, if you want to back up and write this one down, knock yourself out. I'm going to erase the whole darn thing, and I'm going to do it 2 different ways. So I'm going to go like this, divide my thing in half, and I'm going to do it 2 different ways. The first way, if I want an increase. So I would take 15 and multiply it by my 20%. This is using my percent equation that we learned before. And that would give me 3, and then I just take 15 and add 3, and I get 18. So I find my 20% of 15 right here, 20% of 15, and then I add it to my original amount to find out what the new amount is. That's one way. You might think that that's a little bit quicker, easier to write down. The second way is that I know I'm going to increase by 20%. That tells me that I have my 15. 15 represents 100% of what I started with. If I'm going to add or increase by another 20%, that means I have a total of 120% of my original amount, which means I'm going to take my 15 and I'm going to multiply it by 120%. That's my 100%, which is equal to the 15, plus the new amount, which is increased by 20%. Now, if I multiply 15 by 120%, guess what I get? 18. Those two ways I think are easier. But if you want to do it the other way, knock yourself out. Let's do another one. 8% increased, an increase of 8% increase of $150. Well, hello. Having a hard time reading it. So I take my $150. I would multiply it by my 8% to find my new amount. And when I do that, that would tell me $12, or 12, okay? I would take my 150, I would add my 12, and I would get 162. So my new amount is $162. Or I come over here and I say, hey, I've got my 100%, which is my 150, plus the 8% gives me 108%. So I'm going to take my original amount, 150, and multiply it by 1.08. And when I do that, guess what I get? 162. You can do that on the calculator and start deciding which way do you like to do it best. This is going to be very helpful if you choose to do it one of these two ways versus using the percent of change way. Going to be very helpful when we get to our next unit, not our next unit, but our next lesson. So ladies and gentlemen, this ends the first video. I know it's a little bit longer. Sorry about that. It is what it is. I need you to find the percent of change for two situations, A and B. 5 cups to 8 cups. 70 meters increased by 80%. Please do both of those. Take a quick break. Come back and watch video number 2.